All right, let's talk about criminal histories, how we use them, why we use them, and I hope to cover both the communications perspective and the field operations perspective. And the reason why I'm going to do both of those in the same video is because I hope that by kind of seeing and hearing about things from one perspective, it helps you understand the other and vice versa. So let's talk about criminal histories from a CGIS perspective or from a telecommunicator perspective. I know that we do have to fill in some information every time we run a criminal history. So whether it's for an investigation with CID or it's an officer on a traffic stop, you have the little drop down where you put criminal justice and the officer's name and then, a case number or something like that. That's all we need in there. We don't need a reason. It doesn't have to be drugs. It doesn't have to be theft. That box that says criminal justice combined or coupled with some kind of law enforcement call, something that you put in the computer, some kind of call for service, that's enough. Nobody has to say anything about a specific reason why. A criminal justice investigation is enough of a reason. And we tie that all together using the unique call number or case number. Either will be just fine. And what we don't want to do is make the process of obtaining a criminal history so hard and tedious that officers in the field are not using a very valuable tool that they have at their disposal. So from the dispatch perspective, if an officer requests a criminal history and they are on some kind of call, it's okay. And that's all that we need. That's all that you need to put in there is the criminal justice, the kind of call, and investigation or whatever, or use the call ID or the case number. I understand that there was a time in our history where we required officers to be very specific about what they were asking for that history for. And that is not a CGIS requirement, and it's causing our officers to miss really important bits of information. And so we need to fix some things so that that tool, the criminal history tool, is better used by all of the people in our department. So if an officer comes over the air and asks for a criminal history, set your default to yes. They don't have to give you a specific reason why, nor should they. And we'll cover that some more here in a minute. But if you have any specific questions about the hows and the whys of that particular function, get with Whitney and she'll explain that to you and show you how that's supposed to look in OpenFox. Also, when it comes to giving the officer the criminal history return, keep in mind that unless the officer says otherwise, they need the entire return. So don't just give them drugs or don't just give them theft, because in doing that, we may miss the aggravated assault on a peace officer that would be really important for the officer to know, regardless of whether or not they were on a theft report call or not. Or, all criminal history, including something like, murder or aggravated assault, even if they've called out over the radio 95 found, and you suspect that they're looking for drugs and they want, the drug convictions, give them the whole thing unless they say otherwise. And officers, if you're looking for something specific from the criminal history, then say that. Just like on the radio, if you're running a passenger, we don't care about the status of their driver's license most of the time. All I want to know is that person wanted? So dispatch, I need 29s only on that person. It keeps the radio traffic brief, and it gives you just the information that you need. The same is true with criminal histories. If you're on a theft call and that's really all you care about, then you can say that over the air. Hey, I need a 43 thefts only. And dispatch will know to only give you that information. But I would caution you against doing that as a blanket approach. So if you're in a specific situation and you only need specific information, that's fine. But if you are investigating criminal activity, then keep your options open, keep your mind open, and get that whole criminal history return back. Now, we need to know about arrests and convictions. So both are indicators of the person's past, and really both are valuable. So please, in your returns, don't just give arrests and don't just give convictions. Give them both. How you want to do that may have something to do with personal preference. It may have something to do with how you're trained. Again, I'm going to defer to Whitney and allow her to come up with kind of a standard approach for how we're going to deliver that information back to the officer. But all I'm asking is that we get all of the information back. Another critical piece of information is not just the criminal history, but it's also the last arrest. That's in that summary block down at the very bottom. It's going to say, last arrest was on this day by this agency and likely what charge. That's also a very important piece of information because we're looking at time and distance. So if somebody was arrested for possession of meth 20 years ago, that doesn't indicate that criminal activity is going on right here, right now. But if they were arrested 2 weeks ago for possession of methamphetamine, that changes the whole scenario. So again, it's not just about arrests and convictions. It's also about time and distance. When was the last arrest? What was the last arresting agency? And so on. Along those same lines, we need to know if the person is on probation, parole, or if the last arresting agency was the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. If they've been in prison for 10 years and just got out 2 days ago, it doesn't matter that they've got 30 arrests. If they've been incarcerated for 10 years, they're not addicted to drugs, and they likely have not committed any crime yet. I'm generalizing, but you understand what I'm saying. The fact that they've been in prison and just recently got released is a valuable piece of information to the officer. And we don't know that, number one, if we don't run a criminal history. Number two, we don't know that information if you don't give it to us. So really take a minute to consider all the valuable components that are contained in that criminal history and make sure, dispatch, you're giving that information to the officer. I will also say on the topic of drugs, it's really important that you don't overgeneralize those arrests or convictions back to the officer. So saying he's got 10 arrests and convictions for possession, that's not the information that I need in the field. Possession of what? How many times for each? That all leads me in a certain direction. Officers, you'll understand this. Somebody who's addicted to meth behaves differently, and there are different indicators than somebody who's addicted to heroin, than somebody who's addicted to marijuana gummies versus somebody who's addicted to pills. Those are all different people, and they present in different ways. There's different indicators. So it's really imperative that when we get that return back and it indicates drug possession, that you tell us what those penalty groups are. PG1, I'm automatically thinking cocaine, heroin, meth. If you give me 1A, I know it's LSD 9 times out of 10. If you give me a 2A, it's gummies, or a 2. If you give me a 3, automatically think pills. Again, the number, the PG group, may seem insignificant behind the console, but to an officer who knows what they're doing, those things are all valuable pieces of information. So please don't shortchange us by not giving us all the information. Now, how are officers using the information? Because I would understand, why are we going to such great lengths to deliver all this information to the officer? It seems a little extreme. It's not, I promise. Let me explain how it works and how it's used. So officers make contact on a traffic stop. Let's just say speeding, for example. Hello, sir, ma'am. I'm Officer Monishagan, Lake Worth PD. The reason for the stop today is for your speed. Do you have your driver's license and insurance with you? While they're gathering the things that we're asking for, the first question should be, are you on probation or parole? If the answer is yes, it's a perfect segue to what for. What are you on probation or parole for? If the answer is no, I'm not on probation or parole, then you clarify with, have you ever been arrested? Or have you ever been? Have you ever been on probation or parole? Or have you ever been arrested at all? If the answer is yes, naturally you're going to ask, what for? Those things tell you about the person you've come in contact with. And you can either titrate up or down the encounter. Do I need to be a little more on guard? Is this person somebody who's been dealt with and handled and may be a risk to me or the public? Do I need to have a heightened approach? Or have they been dealt with and I'm trying to get in the car, or I'm going to try to take this investigation to another level? So I'm going to play it differently because I know that they've been through the system and they know what's going on. Versus no arrest, never had any encounters with law enforcement. They're not up to no good. Okay, so all of those questions tell us about what kind of person it is that we're dealing with. Now, that's all word of mouth. We're trusting that they're either telling the truth or they're not. No officer should take the person's word for it. You have to check and verify. So once you've locked them into that story upon initial contact, these are all questions you have to ask in the first minute. Then you can go back to your car, and if you feel like something's going on, you check and verify. So you can call dispatch and you can ask for a driver's license, warrant, and criminal history query on that person. The query is going to tell you whether or not that person was telling the truth, or they were minimizing the truth, or they were omitting details from the truth. If they lied, omitted, or minimized, you should conclude that criminal activity may be afoot. Let's review what reasonable suspicion is. Sufficient and articulable facts or circumstances, or reasonable inferences drawn from those facts that would lead a reasonable officer to conclude that criminal activity is afoot. If you encounter somebody who lies, minimizes, or omits information about their criminal history, you had better be reasonable in assuming criminal activity is afoot. I'm telling you, you need to be suspicious. And if that's not where you're at on the reasonableness scale, you need to get there. Any normal person who's not doing anything wrong should disclose to a police officer what their background is like. And it's got a few different scenarios in how I've seen it play out over my career. So people may, in the area of minimization or omission, they may have a long drug history. And if they're in possession of drugs, they don't want to tip you off to the fact that they've been dealt with a lot for drugs. So they may say, yes, I've been arrested. And when you ask what for, they may disclose things like traffic warrants, an assault. I got in a fight with my brother one time, or my girlfriend one time, or I got picked up for shoplifting, something like that. If you don't go back to your car and verify that, you don't know. Chances are you're going to think, the person was pretty honest with me because they told me they had been arrested and disclosed some of the things that they had been arrested for. But if you don't run the criminal history, you're not going to know about the 15 drug arrests that they had in addition to the things they told you for. the fact that they minimize those things should indicate to you, the reasonable officer, that criminal activity is afoot and you should look into it. Lying about your criminal history is reasonable suspicion. The courts have made that very clear. So that's one way that you can leverage a criminal history as an investigative tool in the field. Now, to reinforce the point I made earlier with dispatch about giving the whole return, as an officer on criminal patrol, that's key. It's not drug patrol. It's not stolen truck or trailer patrol. It's criminal patrol. That means all crime all the time. You should be watching out for and skilled in the detection of all crime. Don't get laser focused on dope, because if you're laser focused on dope, you're going to miss money, you're going to miss guns, you're going to miss people, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. So make sure that you're taking an all crime approach to your work in the field. Because of that, when you request a criminal history, don't say, I need a 43 for 95. Because that's going to paint you into a little box. What if the criminal activity that's afoot has nothing to do with drugs? What if the trunk is full of fraudulent, identifying information? What if there's a body in the trunk? What if there's guns in the trunk? You're not going to get the indicators of criminal activity if you're focused on one thing and you just breeze right over it. So I see a lot of times officers asking questions only about drugs. So, hey, driver, is there anything in the car that shouldn't be in there? Do you have any drugs? Have you ever been arrested for drugs? If you got a little bit of this, just let me know. And so we only give them the out for drugs. We only focus on drugs. But I can tell you from experience, if you'll open your mind to all crime, you'll get into some crazy stuff that is a lot more impactful than just drugs. As you know from my background, I spent a long time in criminal interdiction. And when that started, we were laser focused on drugs, loads of drugs. That's all we wanted. So we only worked the southbound direction, and we found some of the loads. But it wasn't until we turned our attention to an all crime approach that we began finding cash loads. We began finding missing and exploited children. And as cool and as fun as drugs are, you have never felt a rush until you've rescued a kid. So I would really encourage you to take that all crime approach. Again, with the criminal histories, be aware, be on the lookout for things like sexual assault, kidnapping, interference with 911, any kind of situation where you feel like things may be a little hinky. Run that criminal history, and it may open your eyes and point you in a direction that you were just not considering. It's an investigative tool. And if it's the right situation and you feel like something's going on, use it. And, dispatch, I just want to ask that you be an investigative outlet for the officer. So, don't, sigh or seem put out on the radio, because it's going to discourage the officer from using the tool. And this is really great. This is a collaborative effort. We don't have access to that information without the dispatcher. So we've got to partner together and work together to solve these problems. So I just want it to be a mindset adjustment. I don't want the criminal history to be something that's like, I don't want to run it because it means I'm going to be on this stop a little bit longer, or I don't want to run it as a dispatcher because it's going to take time and it's extra steps and it's not something I'm comfortable with. Like, we need to get past all of that. We need to get comfortable running and using criminal histories. It's going to make us better in the field, and it's going to put us in a position to do better police work. So anyway, I hope that explains it and it kind of clears things up. More guidance is going to be coming out from the sergeants and from Whitney in the manager position to kind of keep this conversation going. And don't be afraid to come talk to me or bring it up, through the chain to your sergeant. If you have questions, if, maybe I fumbled over my words and I didn't make something clear, but use the tool. It's valuable and you're not putting anybody out. So anyway, hope this helps. Hope it clears things up. I hope that this method of communication works. If it doesn't, or you want to see something different, let me know. This is going to be the first of these that we've done. And, I'm just looking for ways to put information and conversation in the palm of your hand or, on your computer in the field and get it to all of you at once. But, I'm open. If this doesn't work or something else would be better, I totally understand and I'm willing to, explore that. But anyway, y'all stay safe, have fun. I hope this helped.